Hello everyone, Lamau Hearthstone here, and today I wanted to talk about Tamsin's Heropower. Here I picked Sir Finley. Don't be surprised, I get the Tamsin Heropower. I lied, it's not a Tamsin video, it's a Finley video. But I wanted to talk about Tamsin's Heropower because it is one of the strongest hero powers in the game, I think. One of the best late game hero powers to roll into, off discover new hero power, or just in this game, starting with Tamsin Heropower. It's a really strong hero power that gives you excellent early game tempo, it gives you excellent late game builds, it is easy to dupe, dupes your stats naturally, incredibly strong, also incredibly hard to use, incredibly easy to mess up, incredibly easy to get no value from, which I see quite a lot of new players doing. And so I wanted to give you a crash course on every single little niche interaction you need to know with Tamsin Heropower so that you can learn how to abuse this hero power and use it like a professional and not mess up and feel like a chud. So first things first, what is Tamsin Heropower? Well, it is a hero power that is start of combat, give your lowest attack minion death rattle, give this minion stats to other friendly minions. So long story short, you have a death rattle like this on my board, for example, Crab Guy. He gets the death rattle start of combat, that gives his stats. His stats are 1-1, because he's a 1-1 minion. So when he dies, he'll give 1-1 to everything on my board, which, as you'll notice, happens after the crab gets summoned. So the crab comes out as a 3-2, then it gets buffed by the Tamsin Heropower, it gets 1-1. So, first things first, this hero is excellent with summons. Your death rattle will happen first, based on the order it received the death rattles. So since it starts the combat with its actual death rattle of summoning minions, then it gets the buff death rattle, it'll happen in that order, where the minions will be summoned, then it'll get buffed. So if you have, for example, a Harmless Bonehead, 1-1, death rattle summon 2 1-1s. It'll die, it'll summon 2 1-1s, and then those 2 1-1s will both get +1/+1. Amazing, you have a 5-5 effectively on turn 1. Great tempo hero power early game. Now, how does that win games? Obviously, you can use it pretty early on. Just put your lowest attack minion first, give your board some nice buffs. 1-1 is not bad on everything, it's like a free shiny ring. You should win all your early fights on this hero, ideally. Quite nice. Obviously, it's lowest attack, so if you have a low attack minion that you have taunted that has a lot of health, like maybe a Wrathweaver, 1-4 minion, it'll die, it'll give 1-4 to everything. That's quite nice, that's pretty strong. So the first thing to think about is controlling what your lowest attack minion is. If you have 2 minions that are both 1-1s and they're tied for the exact same amount of attack, it is a 50-50. It's completely random what the hero power goes on. So you want to avoid that at all costs because then you won't know which one to put first. Maybe one of them has a death rattle, one of them doesn't. It's not fun. You really want to be able to control which is your lowest attack minion. There's a few ways to do that, either by just selling the other one, or running a pointy arrow, or some kind of buff spell, Tavern Dish Banana, anything like that. Spellcrafts are a nice way to buff minions out of range. You can kind of control what the lowest attack minion is, so that it's always first. Ideally, you want it taunted as well, because obviously if your whole board is dead, and then your Tamsin minion dies, it doesn't really do much, because it can't really give its stats to anything. So that would be the first tip. Is always trying to control your lowest attack minion, always trying to have it die first ideally, and running as many summons as possible carries you through the early game. If nothing else, you're a 14 armor hero, and you've had a great early game, and you can change your hero power later. But, as I mentioned earlier in the intro of the video, I also think this is one of the best late game hero powers. And that's because the words, give this minion stats to all your other minions, is really strong if you think about it. So let me put you through the easiest example. You're just playing a regular stat comp. You're playing like Drust Pirates or Shop Buff Demons, and you just have like 5 big guys. You've got 5 200 minions. Well, maybe you're running a Bran or something too to make money. Your Bran will always steal the hero power because he's not a big demon, he's a 2-4, which is pretty bad. So I would recommend in late game, if you have 5 big minions and maybe a little econ setup or something, sell your econ on the last fights. It's fine to play down a few minions with this hero, because if you're just running 5 200 minions and one of them dies, it's giving 200, 200 to all your other minions. That's a free 800 stats. It's basically doubling your board strength, even though you're playing down a couple minions. So that would be the first tip, is don't feel bad playing down a few minions. I would not do this in the mid game, because obviously money is very important still. You need to have Bran to make your demons big in the first place. I would consider this maybe like top 4, damage cap is off, you're going against like someone who's strong like Mex or something and you really need the stats. That's when I would do this. I wouldn't do it otherwise. But that's the simplest way to use Tamsin Heropower late game, is you just have a board that's all relatively same size and you get a nice buff out of it. Pretty simple. Also applies if you discover into Tamsin Heropower and you're playing a demon comp. You can just sell a few minions, pivot into it very easily. Now, how do we really abuse this hero power? Well, first things first, I only really pick Tamsin in beast lobbies. I find beasts are the best because of Monstrous Macaw. It is a 4/3 rally, trigger your leftmost death rattle. And this obviously can work with Tamsin Heropower because it gives that death rattle to a minion. So Macaw is excellent because you can double dip, so to speak. So if you have a board full of 200 200s and your Macaw is also 200, like for example in this video, I think I get that with just RDU beasts, like running Rapid Panther and cycling a lot of beasts. Pretty easy to buff a Macaw. You can buff a Macaw in Overflow Undeads too. It's also pretty nice. You can have it so that your Death Rattle minion can be attacked, like the Macaw will attack, give the Death Rattle minion stats to all your minions, including itself. So if your Macaw has Wind Fury, it'll be able to attack again probably because it'll survive the first hit. It gets out of control very fast. If you have Golden Macaw, you're doing that hero power 4 times till your whole board. Suddenly, even if you just have a board full of 200 200s, you're giving thousands of stats to everything, and it's amazing. The other nice thing about Tamsin Heropower is it's very hard to stop, almost impossible in fact, because it's a death rattle. There's not really anything that removes death rattles in the game. It's also start of combat. Not really anything that could beat start of combat, except for like maybe an Illidan Heropower. So yeah, very, very strong with Macaw, highly recommend. Rivendare, obviously, also very strong. Doubling death rattles, your hero power gives a death rattle. Makes perfect sense. The thing about Rivendare is, it is very hard to buff Rivendare's stats. So I find sometimes when I'm running Rivendare, I've got a 1/7 Rivendare, and if the buff goes on the Rivendare, it doesn't do anything, because it doesn't happen when Rivendare is dead, his effect. So what's the point really? And it's very hard to buff Rivendare. Out of that 1/7 range, the only comp off the top of my head that can really do it is Overflow Undeads. That gives stats to everything, including your Rivendares, so I would definitely run it in that comp. But most of the time, even though on paper it's a great idea, can't really fit Rivendare into these comps. Unless section 3 of the video, the most broken word with Tamsin is start of combat. So, let me give you a crash course on start of combat, because this is said nowhere in the game at all, and you just have to figure it out through trial and error. The order of start of combat, even though they all say start of combat, there is a consistent order in what happens when. It's always start of combat trinkets. So, for example, I get a Rylax sticker. Start of combat, trigger the death rattle of your Rylax. Then, start of combat hero power. So my Rylax death rattle will have already triggered before it gets the hero power, which is unfortunate, but good to know. Then, start of combat spells. So for example, if you have 2-cost dragon spell, doubles your leftmost minion's attack, that will happen after the hero power. So if you're doubling the attack of something that's low attack, then it'll get doubled after it's received the hero power, and it'll give that doubled stats to everything. Pretty good. Same thing with Beetle Spell. Beetle Spell won't grief you if you play it on an empty board, because your hero power will happen before the beetles come out to steal the hero power target. And then finally, minions in start of combat happen. And that includes minions in your hand. So for example, Flighty Scout, start of combat, summons itself from your hand. That won't get Tamsin Hero Power because of the order of operations. It's like PEMDAS. You've got your trinkets, then your hero power, then your spells, then your minions. It's never explained anywhere in the game. They all say start of combat, and they all happen at different times. Also, if you have multiple start of combat minions on your board, the order is always left to right. So if you have a stitched, that's to the right of a start of combat unit. That start of combat unit will happen, then the stitched will eat it. Then the rest of your board will happen in order. So that's the order of operations. Now that we understand all of that, how do we best abuse it? Well, first things first, we don't like minions like Flighty Scout, because they can't really get the buff, because they come out too late. So that's a shame. You don't really want things that summon themselves from your hands. That also applies to any Murlocs you summon with the start of combat. Dire Muck Forger, I think his name is. So stay away from those. But there are numerous comps in the game that grow themselves only in combat or start of combat. To name a few, the most easiest one to understand is Evoker. Start of combat, give all your dragons 2/1. Playing a Tyrant spell improves this. Let's say your Evoker gives everything 150 in stats. That's pretty medium sized, that's nice. With Tamsin Heropower, since we know that it'll happen before the Evoker happens, we can play a very low attack dragon, like maybe a Twilight Hatchling, 1 mana, 1/1, tier 1/1/1, sorry, not 1 mana, and taunt it, and then start of combat, that will get the Tamsin Heropower. Then Evoker will buff it to give it 150, and then when that minion dies, it'll give 150 to your whole board. Because remember, Tamsin doesn't care about the actual real stats of the unit, it cares about the stats it had when it died. Its maximum stats, that is. So if you have any way of buffing the thing with the hero power in combat, it is amazingly strong. Like, it is when Tamsin Heropower feels broken. Think, for example, Ring Bearer Nagas. You've got a pretty weak board outside of combat, maybe even so much so that you can run a Rivendare, and then you have your Tamsin Heropower on either something you're Macawing or something that's taunted. Ideally something you're Macawing so that it can't be sniped before you attack, but let's say it's on something taunted, you attack first, you play all your buff spells off your Ring Bears, it gets buffed to 100/100, then it dies, your Rivendare will still be on board and buffed as well. That's how you can run Rivendare with Tamsin Heropower, is these in-combat scaling / start of combat comps. There's a few particularly broken cards that used to be in the game. Some of them still are, but they're just not in the base pool. Immortal is one of them. Amazing card. It is a Time Warp card, as well as a Protoss minion from the Protoss hero, who I'm forgetting the name of, Artanis, that's who it is. Start of combat, it gains the stats of both adjacent minions. As we know, hero power happens first, so if you have two 200 minions, and you put an Immortal in the middle of them and taunt it, all of a sudden, you've got a 400 with the Tamsin Death Rattle on it, that when it dies, gives 400 to everything. Like, it is absurd amounts of stat duping. And those are the kind of comps where it's very easy to run a Rivendare, because you just find a couple pointy arrows, you make a Rivendare 9 attack instead of 8 attack. All of a sudden, Immortal is dying and giving 800 to your whole board if you have two 200 minions. Very, very strong. Other thing to consider is, since it's in combat stats, you can abuse it with dragons. So we talked about the Evoker example already, where you've got a Twilight Hatchling, maybe a Rivendare, because your Twilight Hatchling's a 1/1 outside of combat. You go into combat, it gets big. Then when it dies, it'll give that stats to all your dragons, and if you're running any Poets or Terragosas that keep stats in combat, you can actually save those stats outside of combat, which is incredibly strong, obviously, because all of a sudden you're getting... It's basically multiplying your Evoker to be twice as strong, because it's giving the Evoker stats to everything twice each combat. First time with the Evoker proc, second time on the thing that dies with the Tamsin Heropower. Can't even go up from that if you're running a Macaw, if you're running a Rivendare. You can see how it's starting to get out of control. There used to be a tier 6 unit called All-Seeing Elder, which start of combat gained the stats of your left and rightmost minion, and was a 1/1 at base. Also broken with Tamsin. Anything that says start of combat and it gains stats, probably broken with Tamsin. There's probably a way to break that. So even in future seasons, when these examples no longer apply, think about, how do I best use this? How do I best abuse summon units? How can I best find start of combat stuff? And how can I make my board as stupidly high statted as possible?
You are on a path to victory.
So those would be my tips for the hero. I think the order is the hardest part, but just drill it into your head as much as possible that it is always start of combat trinkets, then hero power, then spells, then minions. If you have 2 start of combat trinkets, I have no clue. You're on your own. I think it's the last one you picked happens first, but don't quote me on that. Hopefully someone in the comments knows, or you're just gonna have to search it up and figure it out yourself. But yeah. Also, tip for this season specifically, if you're running Tamsin setup, Crab Guy is excellent. The 1-drop Surf and Surf Beast Naga that gives you a spellcraft that gives you put a crab on something. Your death rattles will happen so that the crab dies and is summoned, then the Tamsin Heropower procs. So even if you're running like an all demon board of 400/400s, just throw a few crabs on the thing with the Tamsin Heropower. Then not only does that summon the minion and you'll get an extra 400/400 stats, but you've basically just duped the stats of that minion. Because if you think about it, even if you have only one singular minion on your board with Tamsin Heropower, 1,000 minion, and you just play a couple crabs on it, you're giving 1,000 to those 2 crabs. Like, it is so easy to abuse this hero power. It's also really easy to mess it up if you're running a Bran, or if your Rivenair doesn't have enough attack, or if you forget the order, and maybe your trinket happens first and buffs something, and then it goes on the wrong thing. Because it is very easy to mess up. If you get your hero power on your Macaw, doesn't do anything. Macaw can't trigger its own death rattle, so that sucks. Same thing with Rivendare. So very easy to mess up. I would be very careful. Here, it works out nicely. Like I said, once again, in the early game, don't worry, like in the mid game, I mean, don't worry too much about your hero power. Just play the game normally. You still need to get stats. You still need to buff your units. You still need to make money. You still need to do all the important stuff towards winning a Battlegrounds game. Maybe I should make a video about those fundamentals, but play normally, so to speak, until you've gotten to that late game. That's when you can start abusing the hero power again. So it's one of those heroes I love because it is relatively high armor. It has really good lobbies with beasts and whatnot. It's also very strong in particular seasons. I remember one of my favorite comps to play was when Ultraviolet was in. He was a 6-drop elemental, like tier 6. Start of combat, he buffed all your elementals, kind of similar to Evoker, based on how many elementals you've played since you've had him on board. And you could just run him with Amalgams and Poets and Tamsin Heropower, which would just let you really easily dupe all your stats on everything. So just like in any season ever, I think Tamsin will always be strong. And I think Tamsin will be one of those heroes that a lot of people sleep on consistently because she's so confusing. And on paper, she just looks like another one of those tempo heroes that doesn't really do anything. But I would make the case that Tamsin is actually one of the best late game heroes, as well as one of the best early game heroes. The downsides of Tamsin is she can be tribe specific. So obviously if you're in a lobby where there's no good start of combat stuff, and if you have the deck tracker, I would just look at the tier 6s and stuff, take a look at what tribes are in, think to yourself what you want to play or lean into. And she can be rough when there's not the tribes you need in. Also, she doesn't make money herself, so the best heroes in this game, obviously, if you've ever watched a tier list, are all money-making heroes. Anyone that lets you level fast, anyone that lets you find the broken cards faster, is broken, super S tier, so to speak. And Tamsin, unfortunately, does not let you do that. But what Tamsin lacks in money, Tamsin gives you in time and health. So most of the time, more health you have from winning your early game fights, faster you'll be able to level, faster you'll be able to turn your health into resources and money by leveling faster than other people that have to stabilize. So yeah, Tamsin's one of my favorite heroes. hopefully this gave you some insight into how to play her. And yeah, this was a pretty nutty game. The tiger carving is very strong. I'm a big fan of it in RDU Beasts. Also Kodo is nice in RDU Beasts, even though here he's kind of griefing my Tamsin right now. But yeah, try to have a game plan going in. Abuse death rattles because they happen with summons before the hero power, and look for start of combat things. Hopefully this helps you. I'll let the rest of the video play. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And yeah, hopefully this gets you to try Tamsin again if you've never picked her. And yeah, best of luck in your games. Thank you so much for watching.